I went to graduate school in Baltimore, and in those years, one of my closest friends was a young woman named Channing. I watched how she started taking more Jewish classes and trying new Jewish practices. She started using her Hebrew name, which was Chana, and she was getting immersed in one of the Orthodox communities there. She got married in the community, and then she had a son. But just a couple of days later, she unexpectedly suffered a stroke. And I watched what a Jewish community could be like. I saw how especially the women had a whole natural way of how they took care of the sick and needy in that community. And because they lived in the same apartment complex and were in and out of each other's homes, when they cooked, they made extra portions and they just brought it upstairs or downstairs. That is just what they did. That's how they lived. They didn't join a committee or sign up for a meal train for that. And at that point, I went on my journey to become a Reform rabbi. But that model of community stayed with me as I joined our congregations and communities. And I knew our community was going to look different from that community because we have a different practice, a different expression of Judaism. For most communities that I was a part of, we didn't see each other on the way and at the kosher butcher and at the day school and at daily minyan. We didn't see each other daily, weekly, or even monthly, maybe a minute here or there at Sunday school drop-off. And I didn't think of that Baltimore community as the only or the best form of Jewish community. But it did make me think about what made us a community, and specifically a Jewish community. Traditionally, we think about community as people who live or function in close proximity with each other, share interests, and have fellowship with each other. And a Jewish community is about offering services and experiences that you can't get in the home alone. A Jewish community is about being interconnected because of our Judaism. And whether that's because of an external sense of commandedness or whether that's internally imposed, there's a sense of obligation and responsibility for each other. And there's the rub for liberal communities because we are based in autonomous choice. And so us rabbis and Jewish educators and Jewish leaders would program around this so that we could offer all of the different aspects of Jewish community, not just taking care of the sick, but opportunities for prayer, opportunities for study, opportunities for social justice, because we were going to have to opt into these or choose these. It wasn't part of our daily life. And the reason we're so obsessed with community and building relationships is because if there's no community, there's no Judaism. In fact, there's no word for religion in the Bible. We are only a people or an extended family. When Ruth joins in, she says, your people will be my people, your God, my God. People before God. Mordechai Kaplan, one of the most important Jewish philosophers of the 20th century, said belonging is more important than believing. We pray in the plural. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, for the sins we have committed, so we need there to be a we. We pray in a group called a minyan, so we need there to be a group. You can't traditionally study a Jewish text alone, only with a partner. So if your partner doesn't come, then you can't do the sacred deed of study. Rabbi Hillel famously said 2,000 years ago, do not separate yourself from the community for all of these reasons. And interestingly, it's not just us rabbis who think about community. In fact, the couples that I sit with week in and week out in my work at Interfaith Family talk about community. In fact, they would like to be part of a Jewish community. But they've shared the challenges they've had to accessing the Jewish community, the community with a capital C. And I'm going to share 5 of them, as all starting with the letter C. So the first challenge I hear is that people yearn for community, but it can be hard if your family isn't mom, dad, kids. We sometimes put that family configuration forth in the forums we have and in the Shabbat stories we tell. And if your family doesn't look like that, it can be hard. And it's especially hard if you're coming to synagogue alone. The second challenge I hear is that people lack confidence when it comes to their Judaism. So you can imagine if you stopped Jewish education at 13 and it was only a couple of hours a week, and now you are 30, you may be very rusty when it comes to your Judaism. And even calling a synagogue, never mind showing up, is going to feel very hard. The third challenge I hear is that people have an inferiority complex when it comes to their Judaism. They feel like bad Jews. They tell me all the things they're not. We don't belong to a synagogue. We're not that religious. We don't know any Hebrew. We don't keep kosher. And we should be doing X, Y, or Z, but we don't want to and we're not going to. And there's guilt. And It has an emotional and psychological toll. It actually stymies us with our Judaism. And even when you are doing Jewish things, like a birthright alumni, or you're sending kids to a Jewish preschool, we're not affirming that we're affiliated. Most of us don't then say we have community. The fourth challenge I hear is that people feel like children when it comes to their Judaism. They may be professionals, they've traveled the world, they're sitting on interesting boards, and yet they can't follow the service or the Hebrew. And that can feel incredibly frustrating and make you feel vulnerable, and you're looking for approval, especially from a rabbi. And then the last challenge we hear over and over is the cost and commitment is too high. So imagine the most vulnerable or intimidating thing you could do right now. For me, it would be taking a spin class. And then imagine that the only way to access it is you sit with an executive director in an office, and you're going to have to fill out all this paperwork, and you can't answer half the questions, and it's very expensive, and you feel like you're making the commitment of a lifetime. And yes, there are easy way-ins and there are incentives, but you know you're going to be hit with that thing, and it's going to be impossible. So what are we going to do? I can no more tell these couples, you want Jewish community? Join a synagogue. You want Jewish community? Take on your Hebrew name and become Orthodox. Synagogues can't have the monopoly on what it means to be affiliated and what constitutes Jewish community. Synagogue is a vehicle for community for so many people, but the model isn't working for the majority of American Jews. And so we're going to need new models and new ways to think about Jewish community, not as opposed to or against, but in addition to. And we can tell people, we can encourage people to call their friendship groups and the people they meet up with to do Jewish things with community, because that is the lens by which we understand Judaism. And there's actually an amazingly creative concept in Judaism that can be a model for a new way to think about community, and that is the Eruv. I actually live under one of these things in Highland Park, Illinois. I don't use it per se, but it is there. And it is a literal wire that is affixed to utility poles that designates a geographic zone where often observant Jews live. And there are Eruvs all over the country and all over the world. And they help that community observe Shabbat. So over Shabbat, once you leave your home, you can no longer carry things because that violates Shabbat. So if you can't carry your house keys and you can't carry your baby, it would be hard to get to synagogue and to your friends' homes over Shabbat. But if you live under an Eruv, it creates an extension of the home, and you can go about your way. Rabbi Lizzie Heidemann, the founder of Mishkan Chicago, has a beautiful teaching on the Eruv. She teaches that we think the Eruv is a legal fiction, which creates an extension of our shared home, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But in fact, it is our shared home, and you don't need a wire to designate it because we share the same ground we walk on, and we share the same air we breathe, and the illusion is that we can retreat to our private spaces. So if we understand the Eruv to be so deeply spiritual, then we can offer people the chance to live under a spiritual Eruv. And what it would entail is that you would list yourself as living under your spiritual Eruv. And you would see all the other people listed. It would be like a spiritual LinkedIn, calling all app developers and programmers. And you would start to see your network of spirituality. You would start to see where you have friends in common, where you have professional overlaps, who has your hobbies, how your kids know each other. And a key to the spiritual Eruv is that there's a spiritual Eruv rabbi. And that rabbi is not tasked with setting a line and making sure it's intact and set. No, that rabbi is tasked with creating lines of connection between everyone under the Eruv so that you know that there's a potluck Shabbat happening down the street, and you know that we're meeting at the coffee shop to talk about a topic you've wanted to learn about. And you know that you can stop Googling how to do a Jewish Hindu wedding because I'm going to connect you with 3 other couples who planned their ceremony last summer. We need seminaries to train Eruv rabbis so that they come out understanding how to be entrepreneurs and social media and human psychology. And this would help with so many of the challenges we talked about earlier, because this is Judaism in our time, in our spaces, in small groups where you can build confidence and ask questions and have a relationship with a rabbi, and it costs less and it's a totally different kind of commitment. When Rabbi Hillel said, do not separate yourself from the community, it's not like community is this thing there, and you can point to it, and when you separate from it, you're leaving Judaism. Because if you can live under a spiritual Eruv, you will find that you're not separate from and alone, but your community is here, and you are a part of it.